So under audit documentation, so we are saying that when an auditor carries out the independent examination of books of accounts of an individual, he is supposed to record all those procedures that he undertakes. The reason why that is very important is because, one, it will help him to avoid what we call the legal litigations or legal suits, where we say this now comes back to the liability of an auditor. Liability of an auditor. So if he has a record of everything that he has conducted in this audit, then necessarily he can defend himself in the case of legal suits against him. So under audit documentation, so this is whereby we are saying audit documentation involves recording all procedures undertaken by the auditor, in carrying out the independent examination and any relevant audit evidence So in other words, this audit evidence is defined as the basis for which the auditor forms the opinion. And we said we had two types of opinion, which involves the qualified and the unqualified opinion. So this is recording of all procedures undertaken by the auditor and relevant audit evidence and any conclusions and all the auditor's conclusions. So this will form a basis for what we are calling the working papers, preparation of working papers. So these working papers, working papers are those records that you're saying. Working papers are defined to be those records of everything that has been carried out and prepared accordingly. So this refers to all materials prepared, that have been prepared, prepared and collected by the auditor. So through a review of these working papers, you can see why the auditor reached the decision he made. So collected and retained with the auditor, in connection to the audit that he's conducting, in connection to the audit that he's conducting. For example, a predecessor auditor has to keep track of these working papers because he is to give them to the successor auditor who will use them in coming up with an audit methodology to use. So then what are we saying under these working papers, or what are some of these examples of all materials that may be collected? So the examples of this is what we looked at. The last time we talked about the audit programs, and we said what are audit programs? This is a flow of how work can be done in an audit. And we have usually two types of audit programs. It can either be standardized, or the other one is which one? We have the progressive audit programs. So the difference between these two is that for standardized, they are used for all audits. That's why the name, it is standard. It can be used for all audits. Progressive is according to the needs of the client themselves. Also, so these are some of the examples of what you're saying of working papers or audit documentation. And then also an analysis of items of the financial statements. Also issue memorandums. So this is memorandums that contain what the auditor has encountered, and then also any relevant correspondences. And correspondences mean the conversations between the auditor and the relevant parties, also the relevant parties. So any communication with those charged with governance will be included in this documentation that you're saying. So if we say that an auditor has to prepare these working papers, on what grounds or what qualities must these working papers meet? So the qualities of good working papers, remember, the qualities of these good working papers are meant to be a guideline for the auditor to create these working papers. And if these working papers form the basis of the auditor's opinion, then one of the things that it should have, should be comprehensive in nature. And by comprehensive, it should contain all the relevant information. Comprehensive. So that means it should contain all the information. Should contain all the information, all the relevant information. So in other words, this information that will form the basis of the opinion should be contained there also. And then we are saying it should contain accurate information. Accurate information should contain accurate information. Accurate information. Accurate information that can be relied upon. So the working papers should be an outline of the information that the auditor has been able to come up with, regardless of his personal judgment. So that is what you're saying. It should contain accurate information, and then also should contain what we call facts. Should contain facts. Should contain facts. We said some of the fundamental principles of an auditor is which one? Fundamental principles that guide an audit. One is we have integrity, also objectivity, and then professional competence and behavior and due care. So objectivity states that an auditor should not be biased in any way. So even when preparing these working papers, he should contain all the facts, regardless of his opinion. It should contain the facts. That is what you're saying. Should contain facts, and not what the auditor thinks it should have. And then also, any form of personal judgment should be well explained, and also any symbols used must be clearly explained. Must be clearly explained. For example, the symbols used in auditing or to denote certain items in the audit, for users of these working papers, that should be clearly explained. It should be clearly explained. And then also they should be well secured under lock and key. Should be well secured. Secured under lock and key. And under lock and key. And under lock and key. So we are saying that these working papers, remember, this is what gives the auditor what the right of lien. What did we say about right of lien? What is the right of lien? Yes. So the right of lien is he has a right to retain these working papers until his audit fees have been met or have been paid. So in this case, these working papers should be stored under lock and key, because this is the original work of the auditor himself. And then that now forms the qualities also of preparing these good working papers. So if you're wanting to gather these working papers, you may make copies of important documents so as to have this correspondence, also this analysis. Also, you can record all procedures that are being used, and also filing reports that have been engaged by the experts. So then, what do you think is the importance of carrying out the documentation? Importance of documentation. I have highlighted a few of them. Why the auditor needs to document these procedures. One is that it provides the basis for which the auditor forms an opinion. So one, it provides a basis for the auditor's conclusion. A basis for the auditor's conclusion. Remember this, from a review of this now is where the opinion comes from, auditor's conclusion. And then also it facilitates review of the work done. Review of the work done. of the work done. Now, this review that you're saying is a form of a quality control which you're going to look at. So we usually have different types of reviews. One of them is known as the hot review, and also the other one's called the peer review, among others, the second partner review, and an independent audit review. So for hot review, this is where the senior members or senior members of an audit team review the work of the junior members. So, and how do they do this? The junior members have to have been preparing or documenting all the procedures undertaken so as to facilitate this review of work done. That is what you're saying. And then also, so that is the importance of documentation. And then this documentation, these working papers may facilitate training. The reason why this is the case is if you're taking a new audit engagement and there's the staff that is there, you will undertake training of this staff by reviewing the working papers of the previous auditors or the predecessor auditors. And then also to control the current year's audit. So facilitate training of new audit staff. And then control the current year's audit to facilitate control of the, or used to control the current year's audit. Used to control the current year audit, the current year's audit. For example, these audit programs, they outline the procedures and the tests that the auditor will do. So the control in this way is seen that what are some of the items that we have not done. Also, another example of analysis is checklists. You come up with a checklist of items to do. So it facilitates control in that you can be able to know or keep track of the work that you have done and what you have not yet accomplished. And then it facilitates subsequent years audit planning, It facilitates subsequent years audit planning. Audit planning. So we said under audit planning, the steps involved in audit planning involve what? Obtaining the knowledge of our client and industry. And how do you obtain this knowledge? One will be a review of these working papers from the predecessor auditor. So that is what you're saying. It may influence the planning of these audits of the current years and the years to come. And then also, it provides direction and supervision. It provides direction and supervision of the audit team, of the audit staff, or of the audit team, of the audit staff. So that is what you're saying, of the audit staff. So this documentation is very important in carrying out an audit because it will help the auditor arrive at a conclusion that you're saying. So remember, we said that one of the things of the good working paper is that it should be well kept and also it should be properly organized. We also have another one there that you're saying it should be properly organized. And then how do we organize these working papers? The organization of working papers. So this is where we actually put these working papers when conducting an audit. So necessarily we have two ways in which working papers may be organized. So the first one, you may decide that these working papers are to be kept in what we call a permanent audit file. In this permanent audit file, these are for items that are to be used for years and years to come. So it is not limited for the short-term importance of the auditor. Rather, it is for the long-term importance of the auditor. So items that are kept here are necessarily to be used for years that will come, that in that audit of that client. So we are saying So this one is used for putting working papers, that here, for putting working papers of this long-term importance to the auditor, of long-term importance to the auditor, of long-term importance to the auditor, and may be used beyond, beyond current year's audits, So in this type of file, the contents that you will expect include things such as, one, the constitutive documents, which include, this is memorandum of association, and also what is this? This is articles of association. You see, these ones are not necessarily likely to change anytime soon, and they are of importance to the auditor for the longevity, or for the time that will be there. So in this, it can be used beyond the current year's audit. That is the key term. And then also any relevant legislation that govern that company, relevant legislations. And then also thirdly, will be concepts such as the engagement letter. If this auditor is to audit this client for an indefinite period, things such as the engagement letter will be, and the permanent audit file. And what are some of the instances in which the engagement letter may be revised? What are some of the reasons or why the engagement letter may be revised? One is, what are some of these instances? Go back to where we wrote on the engagement letter. So what are some of the reasons why the engagement letter may be revised? One is, so first of all, the engagement letter, this is a letter written by who? Is it the auditor to management or the management to the auditor? It is a letter written by the auditor to the management as a formal acceptance of the engagement that he has undertaken to audit this client. So the reasons why this engagement letter may be revised may be in the case of a change in scope of the audit to be undertaken, and there is a need to review that. Also, any changes in relevant legislation, but now that may not necessarily happen every now and then. So the engagement letter will be placed under the permanent audit file, also alongside the entity's business description. So entity's business description. If you're offering products, those types of products that are being offered may not necessarily change over time. So entity's business description, what it deals with, what are some of the services, all of it will be contained in this file that you're calling the permanent audit file. The permanent audit file. And then also the physical and postal address, the physical and postal address of the client, postal address of the client. So in other words, these are items that can be used beyond the current year's audit, So they are put in the permanent audit file. And then we have the current audit file. Now, the current audit file now is a pure contrast of this. So in this kind of audit file, it is of short-term importance for, so this is used for this one, you can say is used for putting working papers of short-term importance, of short-term importance to the auditor. And are mainly used for the current years audit. For example, so some of the contents placed in such a file will include what? What would you expect in this file? If you're auditing financial statements, one of the things that will be there is the financial statements for that client for that year, financial statements, a copy of the financial statements, and then also the audit plan and the audit program, and the audit programs. So these programs, especially this type, the progressive audit programs, the ones that are made for the client, for the client's needs, is necessarily what will be contained here. And then also we have written management representation. So this is management explanation representation. Which we will also look at that, and then also what we call the management letter. So this management letter is a letter written by the auditor to the management, highlighting the weaknesses identified in the control system. So this is a letter written by the auditor to the management to highlighting the weaknesses identified in the internal control system and suggesting recommendations on how to improve it. recommendations on how to improve, them. So keep this in mind. We're going to look at this even when you're looking at the evaluation of the internal control systems. So that letter is the one that is written by the auditor to the management. And then also any rationale to the auditor's conclusion, rationale or an explanation, rationale of the auditor's conclusion. This simply means auditor's conclusion. So this means the reason as to why the auditor gave that opinion would be included in this audit file, that what he reviewed did not contain any financial misstatements or is the one that portrays the truth and fairness. So that rationale or the explanation to how the auditor arrived at the opinion that he did will be contained in the current audit file. So these are some of the ways in which working papers may be organized. So you can either put them in the permanent audit file or the current audit file. Now, what do you think influences the extent to which we document these procedures? What do you think are some of the factors that influence the extent to which documentation is actually carried out? One is, yes. So the first one would be the scope. The amount of work that you do will dictate the level of documentation that you need, the nature of the audit engagement. So in that you're saying, so the factors that affect extent, the extent of documentation include what we call documentation. So the first one is on the nature of the audit engagement. Nature of the audit engagement. And then also, so this nature of the audit engagement describes the scope for which the audit will be done. And then also the size and complexity of the client, complexity of the client's business. Of the client's business. For example, if the client has a large kind of entity, will we have more or less procedures? Yes, we will have more procedures because now we have to verify many items and we will document more of those procedures that we undertake. And then also the significance of the audit evidence obtained, audit evidence obtained of the audit evidence. So whatever is gathered from this audit evidence obtained, the significance of it will dictate the extent for which it is to be documented. And then also the specific audit methodology used. Specific audit methodology used. To audit. What are the audit approaches? One is methodology used. We have the approaches to audit. Audit approaches include what? One is risk-based approach. The other one is system-based. Also we undertook to study the analytical review procedures, among others. So this audit methodology that you're saying, this is the strategy for which the auditor will choose to conduct the audit. And then also the nature and the nature of the client's internal control systems. Nature of the client's ICS, the client's internal control systems. So in other words, that is what you're saying. Those are some of the factors that affect the extent for which documentation is to be done. So we have looked at the organization of these working papers. So we are saying that these are some of the contents that may be contained in the permanent and the current audit file. So now we look at the classifications of the different types of audit working papers. So the types of working papers that are there, working papers. So they may be categorized into either. So the first one can be standardized versus unstandardized manual, standardized working papers. And then you have what we call the automated versus the manual working papers. So for this standardized, so the same concept applies. The standardized, this automated versus manual. So for the standardized, you're saying standardized audit, standardized working papers. So this one is where the auditor has prepared working papers. It's just a format. It's like a template for which he will use for all audits. So this is saying is a prepared audit manual developed by audit manual that has been developed, audit manual developed by the audit firm to be used for all audits, That is what you're saying, standardized working papers. So this means that it has already been, it's like a format, an established format. For example, standardized bank letters, the letters to banks, for them to be given confirmations of the, for example, if you're auditing this bank item, so the auditor has to send letters to the respective banks of the client to know the balances that are shown in that, and he or she will verify this with what we call the statement of financial position of the company. So those bank letters that are standardized or are pre-prepared, just filling in a few things and then sending them as what we call the standardized working papers. And then also the unstandardized working papers. So for this one, they are designed to meet the client's specification. So these ones, they are designed to meet the needs for an audit of specific client, a specific client. So these ones, they are tailor-made towards the client that is being audited. So it cannot necessarily be used for any other audit. And then also we have the automated working papers or automated audit files. So this one's automated working papers. In other words, or audit files, working papers. Let's just use working papers. So for this one, these are computer programs that helps the auditor analyze information, computer programs that help the auditor analyze data and extract data and analyze data, Analyze clients' records and data. Analyze clients' records. Analyze clients' records. So what these systems do, they help the auditor to extract data from the systems of the client. So in this kind of automated working papers or audit file, they have certain advantages because you see, one of the things is that you will be able to have or use these platforms of the programs to save up on space. You can imagine if you're collecting this information from a client with, let's say, 20 branches, all of them are sending files to your audit firm or to you as an individual. So these working papers will necessarily free up storage space. So one is they free up storage space. Because you do not have so many files lying around, free up storage space. Also, they are more neat and easy to view. Also, they are more neat and easy to view and easy to review or to view. It's unlike having this kind of documentation from all these branches at your desk. And then also it facilitates quick assessment of risks. Facilitates quick assessment of risks. Quick assessment of risks. This means that the programs can be made to carry out this risk assessment that you're saying. And then also it guarantees a high level of accuracy. High level of accuracy in the data that has been collected. So in other words, this kind of automated system will enhance accuracy of the data that has been extracted. And then also it encourages uniformity of audit work, encourages uniformity of audit work, Now, I want you to tell me, what are some of the advantages of having this kind of working papers? What do you think are some of the disadvantages of these automated files or challenges of adopting such a system? One is, do you think everybody has knowledge in this kind of computer programs? No, so that will necessarily be a challenge that it needs people with computer literacy. Any other? Bola? Yes. So yes, for instance, if these programs are tampered with in terms of viruses, that data will, all of it will be lost. All of it will be lost in this case. So there's risk of data being lost through attacks by those kinds of viruses. Any other? Also, do you think it is cheaper to have such programs or expensive? It is expensive to come up with these computer programs. So the challenges for adopting such a system, challenges of an automated audit file system is that it requires people with skills such as computer literacy. So that is the first one. That is what you're saying. So requires computer literacy, that you have to be able to understand these aspects of the automated working papers. Also, there is risk of data loss or corruption, risk of data corruption by viruses. So this is just a summary of the notes that I had sent you. So in other words, what you're saying is that these automated working papers may have these challenges of also they're saying that it may be expensive to set up this software. And then if I was to ask you, do you think every computer program that is used here is compatible to all clients? Not necessarily. So there's that incompatibility, may be incompatible with the client's software, with the client's software. With the client software. So that is on the automated audit files that you're saying. So who do you think has custodian of these working papers? The right to holding these working papers, is it the auditor or the client? Who do you think has the right to these working papers? Huh? Why? Why the client? So when we were saying, so any documents relating to the client should be given to the client himself, But now necessarily, these working papers are a property of the auditor, they are formulated by the auditor. So there was a case which was held whereby the client wanted the auditor to release these working papers and give him all the necessary information that he had acquired. And when he took the auditor to court, the judge at the time said that the owner of the working papers should be the auditor himself, because necessarily the auditor is not an agent, is not an agent of the client, but rather he is an independent contractor, So until you pay him all this money and you reach an agreement of his audit fees, then the auditor has no legal obligation to reveal this kind of documentation. So you can write these questions there. So one, explain the importance of preparing, and maintaining audit working papers, maintaining working papers, audit working papers, Also, identify 5 elements or 5 contents. Identify five contents of the permanent audit file. And then explain 4 ways of gathering working papers, or 4 ways of gathering working papers. I told you one of them is involving experts, also making copies of the financial, the important documents, and then taking notes of the important areas of the client entities. So that is on working papers or documentation, audit documentation. Now, I want to take you back to the concept of audit engagements. And we said that the audit engagements, or assurance and non-assurance engagements, the difference between those 2 types of engagements includes that one is to give a certain level of assurance over the financial statements. Now, when an auditor decides to undertake an engagement, he puts himself at a risk, at different kinds of risk. One is that the risk of litigation or legal suits because of negligence. So as an auditor, when you are undertaking this audit, you have to think of a way to reduce the exposure to such risks. Because for you, this means that you will have to compensate any person who intends to use on your reports. So you as an auditor, you have to come up with procedures that help you to conduct the audit in a high quality way, high quality manner, so as to reduce the exposure to such risks. So as an auditor, you have to come up with those procedures, and that now leads us next to what I want us to discuss, which is what we call the audit quality control. Audit quality control. Quality control. Audit quality control. Audit quality control. So in this kind of context, we are saying that an auditor has exposed himself to certain risks when undertaking an engagement. So to limit that risk or the exposure to such, he comes up with procedures to ensure that this audit is being done in an efficient manner. So in other words, you're saying, so for this one, you're saying the auditor undertakes to implement quality control procedures to ensure the audit is being done in accordance, in accordance with the established standards, with the international standards of auditing. So this will reduce the auditor's risk of those kinds of adverse publicity, even losing a practicing certificate, among others. Because if he's now, if he does not give an appropriate opinion, or if he acts in a manner that does not meet these standards, then he may have that adverse publicity in the market that he is serving. So under audit quality control, this is what you're saying. So the auditor may implement, so the auditor may implement quality control at two levels, quality control procedures at two levels. At one is at the audit firm level, Number two is at the individual engagement level, or what you're calling at the individual audit engagement level. At the individual audit engagement level. So in other words, these are the two areas in which the auditor comes up with these quality control procedures. Now, at the audit firm level, this is whereby the auditor, now this is from the end of the audit firm. For example, they ensure that anyone who is in the audit firm has the qualified or has the, what we call the, said an auditor has to have for him to be regarded as an auditor. One, we said he has to have completed the, so he has to be registered under ISPAC. Another one has a practicing certificate also, and then registered by, what is this? Registration of Accountants Board. Also, that he should have completed this certification of CPA. So at the audit firm level, this is where the audit firm just comes up with these ways of ensuring that their staff has these criteria that you're saying. So necessarily, we want to focus more on at the individual engagement level. So this one, we're saying the quality control procedures at the individual engagement level, individual engagement level. So remember, we are saying that these are procedures to ensure that the audit is being done in an efficient manner and according to the international standards of auditing. So in this case, these procedures are put in place to ensure that the auditor comes up with an appropriate opinion and also to try and reduce those risks of what you're saying. So at this stage, we usually have the different kinds of procedures and they are organized in this way. So the first one is under client acceptance procedures. Client acceptance procedures, under the client acceptance procedures. So these are just procedures that the engagement partner tries to ensure that everything that has been done in accordance with accepting an engagement has been finalized. For example, in this kind of question, they can ensure that there is no potential threats to independence or potential threats to independence have been dealt with. Threats to independence have been dealt with. Also, there is no possibility of conflict of interest. So for this one, you're saying the engagement partner ensures acceptance procedures have been finalized. So for example, this includes so the first one, you're saying there is no possibility of conflict of interest or the conflict of interest has been dealt with also. There is no one is that the auditor has ensured there is no conflict of interest. There is no conflict of interest. There is no conflict of interest. So in this case, you're saying, what is the conflict of interest? What do you define as conflict of interest? This is where an auditor may pursue his own interest at the expense of the audit objectives. For example, if he's auditing two competing clients, you see there is a conflict of interest whereby one of the clients may influence his judgment to offer an inappropriate opinion or an opinion over their competitors, conflict of interest. So the safeguard to this kind of conflict of interest include, one, you disclose any kind of conflict of interest, and then two, you may withdraw from accepting one of the engagements of this conflict of interest. You see all of those procedures now, we are saying that they will help that the audit be done according to the international standards of auditing that you're saying there. And then also that the potential threats to independence have been dealt with. Potential threats to independence have been considered or have been dealt with. Potential threats to independence has been considered. And we said we have two types of independence or two levels of independence. One is, we have two levels of independence. One is independence of mind and independence of appearance. And what are some of these threats to independence? We said we can have either the self-review threats, also the self-interest, also familiarity and intimidation threats. So such threats being considered at this level, it means that we are aware of the auditor arriving at an inappropriate opinion due to the influence of such threats. So that will help the auditor conduct the audit in an efficient manner. And then also to consider the availability of resources, consider the availability of resources. The availability of resources. The availability of resources for the audit firm or to complete the audit. To complete the audit. So I want you to look at where we said, what are some of the factors to accept or procedures to have before accepting an engagement level? What are some of those procedures? One is, so look at those factors. What are some of the procedures to undertake before acceptance of a client, which we discussed in our previous class? What are some of those factors? to consider or procedures to undertake before accepting an engagement include what? One is, another one. Yeah, so that is ensuring that all the procedures in undertaking or removing the predecessor auditor were followed. You see, these client acceptance procedures and a quality control require you to have an understanding of also those factors to consider before undertaking an audit, an audit. And then another acceptance procedure that will be there will be to ensure that the clearance has been obtained from the predecessor auditor. Clearance has been obtained from the predecessor auditor. Obtained from the predecessor auditor. So in other words, this is just a way to ensure that the audit is conducted in accordance with the international standards of auditing predecessor from the predecessor auditor. So if you want to understand this concept clearly, have in mind that the auditor is having these procedures to try and reduce those risks that he puts himself at when undertaking an engagement. And then also that the management integrity has been considered. Management integrity has been considered. Integrity has been considered. So this now, management integrity being considered is whereby it influences which kind of risk. There, we have three types of risk. Audit risk. One is the inherent and control risk and detection. So the management integrity influences which risk? It is the inherent risk at the financial statement level, which we discussed. So it is their responsibility to prepare this kind of financial statements. So they influence this, or the inherent risk being assessed will be influenced by their integrity. So that has to be considered when conducting the audit, or has to be considered before or when accepting the engagement. And this kind of information over the management's integrity will mostly be derived from the communication with the previous auditor or the predecessor auditor. Now, the next one under these quality control procedures at the individual engagement level will be the procedures under the engagement team. Procedures are when undertaking the engagement team. So in this engagement team, the engagement partner tries to understand the people who are tasked with auditing this company. So the engagement partner evaluates the kind of team that is there. And this will rely on their experience with similar audits, what are their ability to make professional judgment and their technical knowledge. So the engagement partner has to ensure that the engagement team has the requisite skills to undertake the audit, undertake the audit. So what this means is that in ensuring that they have the requisite skills, the management or the engagement partner does an assessment. So the engagement partner assesses the engagement team on the basis of one, their experience, the engagement team on one is saying the experience with similar audit. One is the experience in similar audits. or in similar audit assignment. In similar audit assignment. So remember, under tendering for services, the auditor comes up with a tender proposal. And part of that tender proposal would be the team that will undertake that audit. So this experience will help the auditor to sell or to acquire or obtain professional work. The same kind of experience will help the audit to be done on a timely basis or on a timely basis. And then also their ability, so they will be assessed on the ability to make professional judgments. The ability to make professional judgments. The ability to make professional judgments. And professional judgment, this is using your relevant skills and the knowledge to arrive at a conclusion. And then also the ability to make a professional judgment and also their technical knowledge. In what areas are they more prominent or knowledgeable? Technical knowledge and expertise. So if you're auditing a client or a specific item of the client, the people who have this kind of information or expertise will be called upon. And then also their knowledge of the industry, If you have not been auditing service industries, then necessarily you will not be included in an audit of an entity that deals with services. And then also understanding of the professional technical standards. They will assess them on the understanding of the technical standards. Are they aware of the standards in place, the technical standards? So that is what you're saying under that note. So these are some of the aspects. So remember that all of this is being undertaken to ensure that the audit is being done in accordance with the international standards of auditing. That is what we call the audit quality control. And then also thirdly, we have what we call the aspect of giving the employees direction. So in this case, in an attempt of the engagement partner to try and ensure that the audit is being done in this manner, he will have a meeting that he addresses on the responsibility of the audit team, also the objectives of the audit of financial statements. So for this one, you're saying the engagement partner undertakes or holds a meeting to communicate one, the responsibilities and their responsibilities in the audit of these financial statements, including the need to comply with ethical requirements, with ethical requirements. So in other words, these ones, you're saying he will inform them of their responsibilities. Also, secondly, another thing that the engagement partner is supposed to do is he will inform them of the objectives, communicate the objectives of an audit, of financial statements. And what are the objectives of an audit? Objectives of an audit is to do what? One is to express an opinion, to detect errors and frauds, But now necessarily the aspect of preventing errors and frauds lies with the management. And then also, thirdly, would be to do what? To provide recommendations on how to improve what? The internal control systems. So those objectives have to be outlined for these individuals. Also, this is in a bid to give a sense of direction, and then also the risk-related issues that may be encountered, risk-related issues among others, and then the general audit methodology to be used, general audit methodology to be used. For example, if it is a balance sheet audit approach, it means that we are auditing from the items in the financial statements going backwards to the transaction that led or gave rise to the balances. And then also the objectives of the audit work to be performed, among others. So these are some of the aspects that this auditor would give direction on, and then how to deal with problems that arise in the audit, how to deal with problems in the audit. In the audit. So in other words, this now is the third element or third procedures that would be undertaken by the auditor. And then also the fourth one, so that is direction. Then also the supervision. So necessarily under this one, we are trying to minimize the risk of giving an inappropriate opinion. So we have to supervise the work of the junior members so as to have working papers that are free from errors. So in this one, you're saying the superior or the senior members of the audit team, So this gives rise to what we will discuss, the hot review. Should supervise the work of the junior members. And this means, so this work of the junior members will be constantly reviewed throughout the audit so as to check whether they are following instructions. So this is done to one, check whether the instructions are being followed, whether the audit programs or the instructions, the audit programs are being followed. Or being used. And then what do you think are some of the reasons why the audit seniors or the senior members should also review this kind of work? Also, what if we want to keep track of where the audit has reached? So also to track the progress, of the audit, so that we are able to be or to meet the audit reporting deadlines, to track the progress of the audit. And then also they may undertake this supervision to identify matters that require further consultation, to identify matters requiring further consultation. So that means items that the junior members have been able to identify that require further consultation will be picked up by the senior members. And then also to address any significant matters. Address any significant matters arising from the audit. Significant matters arising from the audit. So this is the fourth element that our fourth quality control procedures at the individual engagement level. And then the fifth one would be this point right here. These matters that you're saying, do we need to consult further? Consultation. For example, in an audit of items that require an expert, such an item or such a quality control procedure will be helpful to the auditor. So on this one, you're saying the engagement partner, the engagement partner should arrange for consultation, on matters that require this or on complex matters. Complex issues or matters. So this means that, for example, areas where the client has different reporting standards, or in the application of a newly established standards. So, for example, so these areas include one, if there is a new international auditing standard that has been pronounced. So one, after pronunciation of a new audit standard or in application, how to apply the newly pronounced standard in application of a newly pronounced standard. So in other words, if there's a new standard that has been brought, if you need further consultation, you should actually have that. And then in case of a client with complex requirement procedures, so for this one, you're saying organizations with complex reporting requirements. And these complex reporting requirements may be in the form of which the auditor is needed to give information of the client, about the client. And then also where there is a disagreement with the management over an accounting policy. Disagreement with the management over an accounting policy. If you need to review this or have another individual look at it, and that is what you're saying, over an accounting policy. And then also when a modified opinion is to be issued. This modified opinion is a form of a qualified opinion. That means there is a reason why this modified opinion has to be given. And then also the sixth element will be on documentation, which we have looked at this documentation. So I want you to write there what audit documentation is. So you say this involves what? What is audit documentation? It involves a recording of all the audit procedures that have been undertaken and all the audit evidence that has been gathered also. All the audit evidence that has been gathered. So you write that there, the documentation, this one you have discussed, and then the another quality control procedures at the individual engagement level is what we call monitoring. So monitoring is different from this supervision, because for monitoring, in this case, you're saying it is a checkup or a follow-up of whether all of these quality control procedures are being undertaken. So for this one, you're saying this is a follow-up. So is a follow-up. Follow-up to check if all the control procedures are relevant and functioning effectively. Is a follow-up to check whether the quality control procedures are effective and functioning accordingly. So that is it on that note. So the quality control procedures are effective and relevant and functioning, are effective and relevant and functioning. So that is what you're saying. So these steps, these procedures will guide you in answering these quality control procedures that you're saying. And then the last one on that note will be on review. And I told you review is whereby your work is reviewed by another individual. So for this one, you're saying, so this is where the audit work that you have carried out is being reviewed by another individual. And we have different types of audit review, different types of review, which include what? One is, I've already told you these types. One includes what? The hot review, types of quality control review. So types of quality control review or review quality control reviews. So one is the hot review. So this is the work or the working papers of a junior member is reviewed by a senior member. So that is why we are saying that. So this one you're saying is where the working papers prepared by junior members are reviewed by the senior members. So why is this review done? So what is the purpose of this kind of review? This is also known as the regular review. What is the purpose of this kind of review? One is to check whether the instructions are being followed. One is to check whether the staff are understanding the instructions. Check whether the staff are understanding the instructions. The instructions. And then also, secondly, to check whether everything is being done in accordance with. Also to check whether everything is being done in accordance with the international standards of auditing. Also, whether the conclusions given are consistent with the finding. Also to check whether, or to check whether conclusions given are consistent. Conclusions given are consistent with the work, the audit work done, or the audit findings. The findings also. And then also to ensure these significant matters have been discussed or consulted. Also to ensure that the significant matters have been raised. Significant matters. Ensure significant matters have been considered or have been raised. So that is what you're saying, to ensure these significant matters have been raised for consideration, among others. And then the other type of review that we have is what we call the post-audit review. Post-audit review. Post-audit review. So for this kind of review, the reason why it is called post-audit review is that it is done after you have completed the entire audit, but just before signing of the audit report. So before you sign the audit report, the engagement partner reviews the work of the audit team. So that is what you're saying in this one. So you're saying is a review after the audit work, has been completed, but just before the audit report has been drafted and signed. Audit report has been signed. Has been signed, that is what you're saying. Has been written and signed. Has been written and signed. So in this case, you have to consider some of the matters for which this audit has been done. So in other words, this post-audit review is done whereby the engagement partner reviews the work of the audit team before signing and writing of the audit report. Audit report. post-audit final review or post-audit review. So this is, in other words, is also what is called the final review. So you conduct a review of the work done by the audit team. And some of the matters you consider is that whether the financial statements comply with the identified financial reporting framework. Also, if the errors that you identified, if they are aggregated, will necessarily lead to material misstatements, and then also performing final analytical review. So this, in other words, so this is a final review. The final review before drafting of the audit report, drafting and signing of the audit report. The engagement partner has to carry out such a review. So, and then another type of review is what we call the second partner review. Second partner review. So you call an individual partner of the company or an independent partner to review the work that he did not take part in. So this is where, so an independent partner who did not take part in the audit, who did not take part in the audit. The audit reviews the work of the audit, reviews the work to reviews the work or the working papers, the audit working papers, to form an independent conclusion. So the reason why this is very important is, you see, if this one auditor gives a qualified opinion and the other one gives an unqualified opinion, so that disparity may lead to what you're saying, a review of the items in the financial statements. So if they, their opinions, they concur with what the audit team did, then that kind of working papers or the kind of audit that has been conducted has been a high quality audit. So in other words, this second partner review is whereby an independent partner who did not take part in the audit reviews the working papers, form an independent conclusion for which it should concur with that of the other kind of auditor. And then the next one will be peer review. So peer review happens at two stages. So the first one is the internal peer review. So this is where a team within the organization, an audit team which did not take part in the audit, carry out whether these quality control procedures were followed throughout the audit. So in this one, you're saying it involves an audit team. So this one, the audit team is usually chosen inside the audit firm. So an audit team, so you can say it involves an audit team engaging a group of independent partners, within the audit firm. Within the audit firm. So the key word here is that it is within the audit firm to evaluate whether the quality control procedures were followed, to ascertain whether the quality control procedures were followed. So all of these procedures that you're saying in this case are evaluated by a team in the organization or an independent partners. So some of the things that these independent partners may consider is, one, the risks associated with the auditors and the audit work that was done. Also, whether the documentation reflects the work performed, and the judgment with respect to materiality. And then the other one is the external peer review. External peer review. Peer review. So this is where you get another audit firm. So this one is not within the firm. This one is another audit firm to come and come and check whether these quality control procedures were followed. So for this one, external review, so is where another audit firm another audit firm is engaged to ascertain whether whether the quality control procedures were relevant and actually followed, and were actually followed. So this means that the external review, their objective is to ensure that the auditors complied with the international standards of auditing, also to provide a level of assurance to the users of the financial statements, and to promote uniformity in application of the professional services. Now write this question there. So this one is an assignment. So highlight four differences. Between a regular review or a regular review. Regular is the one that between regular stroke hot. Regular review. This is the hot review. Regular review and an independent review. So this type of independent review is what you're saying here. The second partner review, independent review, where an independent partner who did not take part in the audit participate in this. So this one is the second partner review that you're saying. So what do you think are some of the differences? One would be, what is the scope of work that is reviewed by the hot review? We said the hot review, we review what? The working papers of the junior members. Up to that point, this is the scope for which hot review is dealing with. For independent review, on the other hand, it deals with the whole audit. Also, for the type of reviewer, for the hot review, so for the hot review, the reviewer is who? Who reviews this work? It's the senior members, while for this one is an independent audit partner, There is an independent audit partner. And then according to this one, it is on regular basis. So the timing in this hot review, it is on a regular basis. While for this one, it might necessarily be towards the end of the audit, or towards after the audit has been completed, but before signing of the audit report. That is what you're saying. So those are some of the differences between those two. So with that being said, that marks the end of that audit quality control. So the next thing that we're going to cover will be on the ICS and internal audit function. So go back to where we discuss what the internal audit function is on the classifications of audit, so that you have an understanding of where we will start in our next class. So we stop there for today.